Welcome to WanaxTV Live. In this episode, we talk about the identity of the Sea Peoples. Before we begin, I'd like to thank to everybody who's joining us in the chat and live right now. I would like to thank to all of the channel's subscribers, all of the Patreons and YouTube exclusive members. And first of all, shout out to Interdict in the chat, and also I will display him on the screen right now. Congratulations on becoming a new member, and thank you for that as well. What a coincidence! This I was planning to give you this shout out even before the episode, and I prepared this little button on this little image on the screen, and Interdict is the first person in the chat basically. So please do a post informing us about future streams as we know when they will occur. Um, so yes, I should start doing that soon. I'm not sure exactly if I'm going to do that for the next episode or so. I do know that the viewership would be much higher if I announce it in advance. But the thing is, I was planning to do this on a Sunday initially, and then I was planning to do it today at 6 p.m. But stuff that's happening related to work and projects and other stuff, they keep pushing it. It becomes difficult for me to just schedule a live stream and then follow through with it, which is why as soon as I done my preparation, I figured out I have enough free time and I turned this on. So even if it's just a few hours before, I agree. I will start doing that shortly. Perhaps by the end of this week, when I figure out the live stream schedule, I should be able to do that. I know that it is not ideal for me to just go live randomly without any announcements, any shout outs. But thank you very much for being here. Hello, greetings. Nice. I got the notification on time. Stoic says, well, thank you for being here. Once again, I am perfectly aware that um, this is not the perfect way to do live, to just go unannounced at a random time, and especially right now when it's late in the evening, and on the East Coast it's 9:45 p.m. on in Europe and so on. It's even more difficult. Heidi says, good evening from Canada, Quebec. Well, shout out to Quebec. Nice. Um, so thank you very much to Interdict, our newest member. And with that being said, as people are joining us live, we will announce the segments of this very interesting topic. The Sea Peoples, the mysterious Sea Peoples, the very intriguing topic related to late Bronze Age collapse, and chiefly known to us from the Egyptian records. We do know that the late Bronze Age collapse happened at the beginning of the 12th century BC, where in a time span of just several decades, many of the major kingdoms and civilizations of the Bronze Age, especially late Bronze Age, suddenly collapsed. And those that survived, such as Egypt, struggled economically, struggled politically, and experienced decline in the following centuries. So it was a possibly catastrophic chain of events, widespread destruction, arguably caused by other factors such as natural catastrophes and so on, but this is all theories when it comes to scholarly. What we do know for sure is that these people roamed through through the eastern Mediterranean, excuse me, during this time, and they caused destruction of many of the wealthy cities, wealthy kingdoms, and even great kingdoms such as the Hittite Empire. Leo Zaz05 says, talking about sea peoples, what do you think about the biblical recount of the Philistines, like in Numbers? We will touch on that in this topic. I believe that we are not going to go heavily in when it comes to the chronology, storyline, aftermath of the Bronze Age collapse, especially biblical sources and what happened afterwards, especially in Philistia and so on. We'll mainly focus on the identity of these sea people groups, as you can see them listed in the screen, on the screen, excuse me. Karkisa, Luka, Sherden, Shekelesh, Ekwesh, Teresh, Danian, Peleset, Weshesh, and Tjekker. We will go through who they were. We'll mention some chronology. We will acknowledge the Egyptian records, which help us, which basically identify these groups. The problem is that many of these identifications are not present in other contemporary sources of other respective civilizations, such as the Hittites. Obviously, the Hittites themselves were destroyed, presumably by some of these groups, and were thus unable to provide us with direct records of what was happening at the time. Real Uvain says, yeah, keep this Bible free Wanax. It is just not the topic of the day. Obviously, if we have an episode about the Philistines, specifically the Peleset, then we will touch on the biblical sources as well because they are very present in the sources. Obviously, that time frame does not concern the late Bronze Age collapse. It's really the aftermath and the rise of the historical Israelites, the kingdoms of Israel and Judea, and the neighboring Philistine city-states as they interacted with the ancient Hebrews. So that might be a topic for a future episode. When it comes to this, I encourage you to check WanaxTV episode on ancient Philistines. You can type it on YouTube, ancient Philistines. I think it should pop out. It should appear on the screen. It's one of the better WanaxTV episodes, to be honest. We dived in the Bronze Age collapse and as it related to the Paliset. We moved on and we talked about the historical Paliset, historical Philistines, their five chief city-states, and the historical relations and conflicts and struggles they had not only with the Israelites and Judeans, but also with the Egyptians, the Assyrian Empire, and so on. So check that episode out. Any specific info on Greco-Phoenicians? Well, I'm not sure what the question is related to. Related to the Sea Peoples, you mean? I don't think that we will be mentioning Phoenicians pretty much. Yes, all the ancient tribes are very interesting, like Chaldeans. Yes, okay. So when it comes to the Phoenicians, we do know their history in the Levant and the colonization that happened after the Bronze Age collapse. A great topic. I never dived into this topic, although there's a ton of material. I think some of the good content on the ancient Phoenicians you can find on History with Sai, so check his channel. But at some point in future, we will cover Phoenicians and we will covered their not part. They didn't really take part in late Bronze Age destruction that happened throughout the Mediterranean, but they were there. They are descendants of the ancient Canaanites who founded these cities. I believe that right about the time of late Bronze Age collapse, we consider the beginning of the Phoenician era in the Levant, but they were really there. Their ancestors still lived in Byblos, in Tyre, in Sidon, in all of those Phoenician cities, even in the Bronze Age, during the Bronze Age. They lived there. So the history of the Phoenicians will be a very interesting topic. So, who were the Sea Peoples? So, when it comes to the Sea Peoples are a group of peoples or entities or tribes or seafarers or pirates or whatever you may call them. They were a group of peoples who suddenly appeared in the late Bronze Age. During the end of the late Bronze Age, we're talking about the second part of the 13th century BC and the early and middle 12th century BC. At the time when the Mycenaean Greece was on its decline, the Hittite Empire was on its decline. During those times, we record an emergence of several groups of people. Some of them are related to the Greeks themselves, some of them perhaps not. Either way, they caused the end of many kingdoms and ultimately caused the end of the late Bronze Age. As you can see on the map right now, we're looking at southern Anatolia, we're looking at the Levant, the area of Cyprus, Eastern Mediterranean. That's precisely where the Sea Peoples caused the most destruction. They caused destruction of the kingdom of Alatia on Cyprus. They destroyed the city of Ugarit, the wealthy city of Ugarit on the coastal Levant, which was a vassal state to the Hittite Empire. Ultimately, they destroyed the Hittite Empire as well, and eventually they marched on Egypt, where they were eventually defeated by Pharaoh Ramses III. With that being said, we will put a little chronology overview here on the screen, and these are the chief events that concern the Sea Peoples in the historical sources. The earliest appearance of, so by the way, some of these peoples, some of these, let me put this back, some of these entities we know beyond the mentions of the Sea Peoples. As you can see, the number 1 and 2, which are Karkisa and Luca, they were known well beyond this context of the late Bronze Age collapse. Luca was a region in southwestern Anatolia, coastal region. We know the Luca lands from the Hittite records. They interacted with the Hittites and with the Mycenaeans extensively, and they were present and relevant to the events of the region ever since the Mycenaean expansion to Asia Minor in the 15th century BC and their clashes with the Hittite Empire. We talked about this in one of the previous live episodes about the Hittite-Mycenaean conflicts in the late Bronze Age. So when it comes to that, we do know that Luca and Karkia, or Karkisa as it is mentioned here, we're talking about the regions of Lycia or Lycia and Caria of the classical times. So those peoples were present since the earliest Hittite mentions of the region and their relations and conflicts with the Mycenaeans. Some think Luca is Lycians. Uh, yes, well, that it's not that some think that Luca is Lycians. Luca is almost definitely the region of Lycia or Lycia. They are mentioned extensively by the Hittites. They had many cities that were mentioned in the sources. There were many Hittite interventions in the area. There were several Mycenaean interventions in the area recorded by the Hittite sources. So we do know that Luca is definitely the region of Lycia. And Karkisa, or Karkia as it is called by the Hittites, is more than likely the region of Caria, which borders Luca or Lycia. So with that being said, back to chronology. The first mention of some of these groups is the Battle of Kadesh. So, Battle of Kadesh happening in the early 13th century BC. We have the Hittite Empire on one side, the new Egyptian kingdom on another, and the city of Kadesh, a very important city in Levant, which was around the border of the spheres of influence of the respective empires that we mentioned, the Hittites and the Egyptians. And that area was generally fought over between the two empires for decades and even centuries. So there are skirmishers, the Egyptian and Hittite skirmishers in the region, culminated in the Battle of Kadesh, which at the time, if I'm correct, was in the possession of the Hittites, or at least allied with the Hittites. The Egyptians under Ramses II wanted that back under the Egyptian influence. So one of the greatest battles of the late Bronze Age and the best documented battle of the time happened at Kadesh. The battle was inconclusive. It was both sides claimed victory, and Kadesh was ultimately left in Hittite hands. It was not conquered by the Egyptians, and the Egyptian records list several allies of the Hittites, well, many allies of the Hittites that took place in the battle, and among them we have Karkisa and Luca, who were the Hittite allies at this time. It is unknown whether these two peoples, the Lycians and the Carians, it is unknown if they took part in the battle as the Hittite allies because they were vassals of the Hittite Empire, which is not very likely. At least not all of Lycia and not all of Caria were under the Hittite hegemony at the time in Western Anatolia. So it is possible that they took part either as mercenaries or as individual little petty kingdoms or city-states of these two respective regions who were allied with the Hittites. Perhaps that was the case also, because we do know that when it comes to Luca, some of the Lucan polities were allied with the Hittites, some of them were allied with the Mycenaeans, or the kingdom of Ahiawa, as it was known to the Hittite Empire. And the same goes to Caria. Carians were likely closer to the Mycenaeans than they were to the Hittites, because one of the chief cities in the region, the city of Miletus, was a major Mycenaean stronghold throughout the late Bronze Age, and thus there was a significant Mycenaean influence in the region as documented by the archaeological evidence. And even in some Hittite sources, I believe Caria or Karkia is mentioned as a land which is not within the Hittite sphere of influence, like a neutral land. It was mentioned in the Tawagalava letter, I believe, regarding Pia Maradu. So that's the beginning of the 13th century that we're talking about. And in the late 13th century, we have a battle of Periri as a part of the Libyan invasion of Egypt, or attempted Libyan invasion of Egypt. Libyans under King Meray and allied with many of the sea peoples as documented by the Egyptians. We have Akwesh, Teresh, Luka, Sherden, and Shekelesh. They all allied with the Libyans, and they attempted invasion of Egypt under Pharaoh Merneptah. Merneptah met the invaders at the city of Periri, and ultimately the Egyptian forces scored decisive victory. I believe the Libyan king was killed in battle, and there were thousands of prisoners of war, which include Akwesh, Teresh, Luka, Sherden, and Shekelesh. They were mentioned as countries and peoples of the north, the northerners, and the context they were mentioned in, it is apparent that we're talking about the sea regions, as known by the Egyptians. They frequently mentioned peoples of the sea, of the islands, in their islands. These are the quotations as mentioned by the Egyptians. So the context when they say northerners, they do not mean northerners from the Levant. They mean northern pirates, allies of the Libyans. And in that context, we are likely looking at the Aegean region, perhaps southern or southwestern Anatolia. Well, certainly because we're talking about Lucca, and possibly regions of southern Italy, coastal southern Italy, and Sicily, Sardinia, and so on. Interdict says, imagine seeing all those chariots. It would be epic. Well, yes, except that the sea peoples mostly did not use chariots. They are known by their sea raids, light mobile troops. So they had a lot of ships. They had the transport ships. They perhaps had some either light warships or transport ships that could be utilized as warships as well. We have Luis Aldamis has joined the chat, and he says this is his favorite topic. And welcome to Luis Aldamis, a frequent viewer, very prominent viewer on the channel, not only on the live episodes, but in the regular episodes as well, always present in the comments. Thank you for being here, Luis Aldamis. All right, so we'll be back. We'll get back to the chat shortly. I see a lot of messages. I'm going to finish with this segment first and then get back to the chat. Battle of Periri, late tail end of the 13th century BC during the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah. I believe it was his fifth regnal year, if I'm correct. He defeated this invasion, and this is where we have Akwesh, Teresh, Luka, Sherden, and Shekelesh coming as sea invaders from the north, aiding the Libyans, ultimately defeated by Pharaoh Merneptah. And then we have the most significant context in which the sea peoples are mentioned, and that is the invasion of Egypt itself at around 1175 BC. And this is after the sea peoples have invaded and destroyed the kingdom of Alasia on Cyprus. The same happened to Ugarit in coastal Levant opposite Cyprus. Eventually, and very shortly afterwards, the same happened to the Hittite Empire itself. Hattusa was destroyed, the Hittite Empire was dismantled. It was fragmented into various Neo-Hittite states that survived in the following centuries. And the Egyptian sources, they report a huge invasion. They report not only a military invasion but also migration with plans of settlement. They mentioned ships, many ships with children, with women who are following the warriors. So it is clear that the objective of the Sea People invasion was not only conquest but also settlement. This was whether they were pushed by somebody else from their own lands or no. That is a question in itself, but the Sea Peoples came to invade, they came to take the land, colonize the land, and settle there. They succeeded in some instances, as in Cyprus. After the destruction of the kingdom of Alatia, Cyprus was settled by the Greek colonists, which tell us that Greeks were very prominent among the Sea Peoples, which we are going to learn shortly in the next segment concerning their identity. So either way, they destroyed, they stationed themselves in the land of Amuru in Levant, and they marched south towards Egypt. They were met on both land and sea around the around the delta of River Nile by the forces of Pharaoh Ramses III, and they were utterly defeated. They were defeated on land and they were defeated on sea at the Battle of the Nile Delta. Invaders are listed as Peleset, Tjekker, Sherden, Shekelesh, Danaan, and Weshesh. So we have new additions here besides Sherden, which has been prominently mentioned already, and Shekelesh as well. So these two groups participated in the previous invasion of Egypt as a part of the Libyan invasion, where they were repulsed, and they are back right now in Levant, together with Peleset, Tjekker, Danaan, and Weshesh. The coalition, as we just mentioned, ultimately destroyed, utterly defeated by Ramses III on two battles, one land battle and one sea battle. And lastly, we have the onomasticon of Amenopi, which is just a scribal compilation, a listing of names, places, and peoples in a rather geographical context, unrelated to any political happenings. But they do give us a few ideas of the whereabouts and locations of the Sea Peoples, or what used to be Sea Peoples at the time of its composition. So we're talking about 1100 BC, and we have mentions of Peleset, Tjekker, and Sherden in the context of being settled in the region of the Levant. We do know this to be true because Peleset were settled in the area of historical Philistia. They were or as we know them, the Philistines in Greek records and in English language. We have Tjekker, which settled a little to the north of Philistia, the city of Dor. And I'm not sure about the Sheridan. I'm not sure where they settled. They were just listed as one of the names, so it doesn't. So their location is not specified. Neither one of these locations is specified in the Omasticon in this document. By the way, we do know the location of the Peleset and Tjekker settlement from other sources, but they are just mentioned here, as well as Luca, which we know where Luca is, the region of Lukia in coastal Anatolia, southwestern Anatolia, and Danaan, which we do not know much about. They're just mentioned by name in this document. Nothing else is said about them, but they prominently invaded Egypt. They attempted to invade Egypt with other Sea People groups. So we do know that they still existed in 1100 BC, which is about 75 years after the attempted invasion, by the way. All right, with this being said, we will proceed to the list of the Sea Peoples. But before we do that, as you can see, I have compiled a list of the recorded Sea Peoples here. But before do that, we will pay attention to the chat a little bit because I see there has been quite some activity here. Real Uvani says Berber Queen Mir Myrina subdued Pharaoh Narmer and conquered her way all to western Anatolia. Okay, Interdict says, I meant at Kadesh, wasn't it 6,000 total? 6,000, you mean chariots? I believe so. The chariots were by the thousands in the Battle of Kadesh. I will I will double check. I think there were a few, there were two, I believe, possibilities on how many chariots were exactly present at the Battle of Kadesh on each side, but in each case there were thousands of chariots by each force. The Egyptians brought thousands, and the Hittites brought thousands of chariots, and supplemented obviously by by perhaps tens of thousands of infantry. So it was a great battle. Inconclusive, nobody was destroyed. Pharaoh Ramses was in big trouble. He was surrounded at some point. He was fighting together with his royal bodyguard. He was fighting himself for his life. At some point, he managed to break out of the encirclement and save himself. And he claimed victory when he returned back in Egypt, but it was really an unsuccessful campaign on his part because the Hittites were not defeated. If anything, the battle was inconclusive. Strategically, the Hittites were victorious because they managed to keep their hold on Kadesh and the surrounding region. And it was only during the period of the following generation of the kings in the Hittite Empire and the Egyptians that they managed to come to peace terms where Hittites did keep Kadesh. Louis Aldamis says Aquesh, Achaeans, Luca, Lycians, Sheridan, Etio, Sardinians. By that you probably mean Nuragic civilization. Shekelesh, men of Arvad. That's interesting. I never thought of it as obviously there are many more theories than those that I listed on this page. Arvad or Arados was one of the Phoenician city-states. I think the northernmost Phoenician city-states during Archaic and Classical period was Arados or Arwad. Luis Alame says, thank you, Wanax. Well, thank you for being here. Actually, I think Luis Aldames adds a lot of value to the episode, especially to the chat. Some think Amalek, enemies of the Jews, are same as Luca. I am not an expert on the biblical sources, so I'm not too familiar. I heard of Amalek, and I know that they are often mentioned in the context of the rivals and adversaries of the Israelites and the Judeans in the biblical sources, but I do not know much beyond that. If I do, perhaps you guys tell me if it's a good idea to do one of the episodes, which could be on ancient Israelites. Perhaps that would be an interesting episode. We could go through the early legendary biblical sources, David, Goliath, their historical relations with the Philistine city-states, their relations among themselves between the kingdoms of Israel and kingdom of Judah, the Judeans, their relations with the Egyptians. They had a lot of trouble with the Egyptians, but also with others, their relations with the Phoenicians, with the surrounding peoples, with the state of Damascus, and of course with the Assyrian Empire, with the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Persians, obviously the Hellenistic polities that followed the conquest of Alexander the Great and so on. We could dive into that. There's a lot of material to talk about when it comes to ancient Israel and ancient Philistines as well. Professional amateur says, I'm late. Have we talked about the. So you are not too late. We just went through the background of the sources that mention the Sea Peoples. So we did not dive into the identity of the Sea Peoples themselves, the main topic of the episode. We are yet to do that. We just mentioned the sources that are relevant to this, which are the sources depicting the Battle of Kadesh, which are not contemporary. I believe it was several decades after the reign of Ramses II. His successor compiled the evidence, presumably based on what was already known at the time contemporarily. Also, the Libyan invasion of attempted invasion of Egypt during Merneptah, Pharaoh Merneptah, and finally the Sea People invasion during the Pharaoh of Ramses III. So those were the main sources based on which we are compiling this list and based on which we are we have evidence of the existence of some of these groups. Obviously, some of them we know of even without the Egyptian sources, but some of the groups are known exclusively from the Egyptian sources. So that's what we went through in the beginning of the episode. So you did not miss much beyond that prep stage. Louis, feel free to take a screenshot of the list. If you want, I can send it to you. But yeah, the real tomahawk is in the chat. Most of the heroic Greeks are Ionian Greeks from Ion, who was historically based on Yavan, son of Yapet, who was mythological Iapetus the Titan. Once again, it is difficult to make these correlations between biblical sources and Greek mythology and Egyptian sources. I mean, it's possible that there was some influence between these, especially when it comes to the Egyptian mythology and its influence on the Hebrew sources and so on. But also, it is just hard to tell for me to dive in those theories. We could talk about that forever and still not have a conclusion. So the Tjekker, Carlos says the Tjekker were probably linked to great legend about the hero Teucros or Teucer. The story how he invaded Cyprus was similar to Tudhalia IV slash Suppiluliuma II invasion of the island. The Danaans are the tribe of Dan. Well, yes, that's one of the theories. I'm not sure if they are indeed the Israelite tribe of Dan. I'm not sure about that. Varangian guards were Norwegians, I've seen. Yes, well, this is medieval stuff that we're talking about. The Byzantine royal guard, the Varangians. Yeah, they were uh, they were Scandinavians originally. Yeah. Teucer was a brother to Ajax, I think. Well, there were several individuals in Greek mythology with the name Teucer or Teucros. The earliest one is the the initial king of the region of Troy, back the original founder of the kingdom, back when it was known as Teucria. Afterwards, he was succeeded by Dardanus, hence we have Dardania, and from that royal house, according to Greek mythology, we have Tros, who is a namesake of the region of Troy, the kingdom of Troy, and Elos, his son, who is the founder, mythological founder of the city of Ilion or Troy itself. But this is all Greek mythology, not very connected to the historical evidence and archaeological of the archaeological site of Troy. The Ionian Greeks from Samos and Caria inhabited the Siva oasis in Egypt as mercenaries. Luis Aldames, Shekelesh, men of the Shekel, or the mercenaries, pirates, in terms Levantine, they are recorded at circumcised. Yes, they are. In fact, all of these invaders during the Lydian invasion, during the Libyan invasion. I'm sorry, I keep mixing up Lydians and Libyans. We are not talking about the Lydians and the kingdom of Lydia at all today. We're talking about Libya in Africa. That's what we're talking about, the neighbors of the Egyptians. So if I say Lydians at any point during this video, that's by mistake. We're talking about Libya, the Libu, as they were known to the Egyptian sources. All right, so without any further ado, here is the list of the recorded sea peoples. As you can see on the screen, we have Karkisa or Karkia, the Carians. We have Luca, the Lucians. We have Sherden, Shekelesh, Ekwesh, Denyen, Teresh, Peleset, Weshesh, and Tjekker. So starting with Karkisa, they the reason I put a little question mark here is it is not the question of who they were, it is a question or whether or not we consider Carians or Karkisa to be the sea peoples. Some scholars do count them among the sea peoples, some scholars do not count them among the sea peoples. The reason is that they did not take part in any relevant sea people invasion beyond the Battle of Kadesh. So whether or not they are could be considered as a part of the sea peoples is a question. They were located on the western Anatolian coast in the region that we know as classical Caria. To the Hittites, they were known as both Karkisa and Karkia, and they were not a single political entity. They consisted of several small polities, little petty kingdoms, and they were led by the respective chieftains. And the same goes for Luca. We're talking about the region of the southwestern coastal Anatolia, the region of historical classical Lucia, or Luca lands, as it is known in the Hittite sources during the late Bronze Age. So Luca lands were also known pirates, known seafarers, and they were not a single polity. They consisted of several or many city-states, little petty kingdoms, and tribal polities, and they were led by respective chieftains. There was no single king or a ruler of all of Luca. Some of the Lucan polities were aligned with the Mycenaeans. Some of them were aligned with the Hittites. Among the chief polities that we know is I believe Arna in Lucan. In Greek we know the city of Xanthos. Also the city of Tlos or Tlava, as it was known in the Hittite records, and Hindua from the Hittite records. These two, the last two cities that we mentioned, Tlava and Hindua, are best known to us from the indictment of Maduwata, where Maduwata betrayed the Hittite army, and the great Hittite general Kisnapili was ambushed and killed by the Lycians in the Luca lands. So Luca was a fragment, or not fragmented. It was not a unified state. It was a group of or a region that consisted of many smaller polities with different allegiances, same as Karkia or Karkisa or Caria. And unlike Caria, Luca was a part of the many adventures of the Sea Peoples. They took part in They took part in the Battle of Kadesh on the Hittite side. They took part in the Libyan invasion of Egypt. They were defeated there, and they took part in the later invasion of Egypt itself. If I'm correct, maybe they were gone by that time. They were mentioned in the Amastikon, but I don't think that they took part in the Battle of the Nile Delta. Let me double check on that, because as always we want to be historically correct. So we have the Battle of the Nile Delta between 1179 and 1175 BC, Egyptian victory, and let me see where the people are listed. So yes, Luca did not take part in the final invasion of Egypt. Luca did take part in the Battle of Kadesh on the Hittite side. It did take part in the Libyan invasion of Egypt, together with Aquesh, Shekelesh, Sherden, and Teresh. And it is known from the onomasticon of Amenopi. But it did not take part in the final battle of the Nile Delta against the Egyptian forces. It did take part in many wars against the Hittites. Presumably, we do know that during the reign of Suppiluliuma II in the early 12th century, at the time of the Bronze Age collapse, at the time of the Hittite collapse, the Hittite ships, and specifically the Ugaritic ships in the service of the Hittites, took part in battles near the Lucan coast. Presumably, Lucans were not allied with the Hittites, as indicated by many of the correspondence between the rulers of Ugarit, Carchemish, and the Hittites themselves. So moving on, we have Sherden. Sherden, possibly related to the island of Sardinia, and or the Nuragic civilization. I believe Luis Aldames mentioned this already in the chat. And the Nuragic civilization was active during this time, and I believe, yes, Sheridan are mentioned as they fought, they were mentioned during the reign of Ramses the Second. In the early 13th century BC, they fought against the Egyptians at first. They tried raiding the Egyptian territory, I believe. They were defeated by Ramses II, and then they were put in service of Ramses II, and they took part in the Battle of Kadesh as well, but they participated on the Egyptian side. When it comes to the Bronze Age collapse, they did take part on the assault on Egypt. They were defeated, and they likely did take part in the destruction of the kingdom of Alasia and the Ugarit. They are possibly associated with an archaeological site in Cyprus called Pila Kukinokremos, if I'm correct. And this archaeological site was only briefly inhabited shortly following the destruction of Alasia, I believe simultaneously with the Greek settlement of the region. So there were exhibits of, or there's evidence of Nuragic civilization pottery found on this site, indicating a connection with the Nuragic civilization, with Sardinia, and ultimately with Sheridan. It was abandoned only decades after its settlement, which would indicate some struggles, disputes, and fights between the Sea Peoples groups themselves. Obviously, we do know that very shortly after the destruction of Alasia on Cyprus, much of the island was colonized by the Greeks, and they likely were the reason why this Pila settlement on Cyprus was quickly abandoned, because they took over most, if not all, of Cyprus for themselves. Obviously, we do know of Phoenician presence as well, especially in the city of Kition, if I'm correct, where we had a dual Greek and Phoenician settlement, and we had both peoples living and ruling the city. We had both Phoenician temples and Greek temples. It was a Phoenician slash Greek city in Archaic period and Classical period as well, if I'm correct. So the Greeks were the chief people that settled, the chief group that settled Cyprus following the late Bronze Age collapse, and they inhabited most of the island, almost all of the cities, except Kition, which was inhabited by both groups. I believe that no city was inhabited by Phoenicians exclusively, and some of the inland cities were inhabited by the Eteocretans, the remnants of the inhabitants, the natives of the kingdom of Alasia of the late Bronze Age. Luis Aldamis, Sheridan in Cyprus, that's interesting. They must have had some autonomous base in any case. Well, this is not a sure thing, but there is, as you can see on the screen, I displayed it under Sheridan, So this settlement was inhabited, I believe, at some time between 1175, 1150 BC. I believe by the late 12th century BC, it was abandoned completely, and the whole area, it was, I believe, between Enkomi and the site of Kition. Don't quote me on that, but the settlement was abandoned only decades after it was settled, and there were there's evidence of Nuragic pottery on the site, which was found by the archaeologists. So the connection is possible, if not plausible. Sherden is definitely, at least linguistically, connected to Sardinia. I don't know of any other candidate for the location for Sherden than Sardinia. So I assume Sherden originate from the Nuragic civilization. And you are free to research this connection with Cyprus on your own further. All right, moving on. Shekelesh, possibly connected to Sicily, to Sikels or Sikeloi, as they were known to the Greeks. Hittite reference also exists, and it is Shikalau. And the Hittite records do mention these Shikalau or Shikaluyau, or I'm not no expert on Hittite language pronunciations, but the Hittite reference, possible Hittite reference to Shekelish exists, and they are mentioned as seafaring people from the west, west of the Hittites. We do not know how far west we go. It's west of the Hittites, so it's mentioned in the Hittite context from the Hittite point of view. But the one of the possible locations, a chief candidate for the location of the Shekelesh is the island of Sicily. And the Sicily has gotten its name. Sicily is named after people known as Sikeloi or Sikels. Now, whether these people were natives to the area, to the island of Sicily, or they were settlers as well, and then the island was named after them. That is not 100% determined, so we'll not get into that at this point. But moving on, we finally start reaching the Hellenic or Greek groups, and we have Ekwesh, who are chiefly related to the Achaeans, according to the scholars. Achaeans meaning the Mycenaean Greeks. I have put Hittite and Mycenaean language versions of the name. Obviously, the Mycenaean would be the original versions because we are talking about the Mycenaeans themselves and inscriptions on their own language. So linear B, Akavia, which means Achaea, as there were several linear B tablets which mention this in geographical context. I believe they mention a person from Achaea where the inscription says Akaviade, which means of Achaea or from Achaea. And obviously we have a famed Hittite reference, Ahiava, which is a late Hittite language version of earlier term that the Hittites used, which is Ahia. And they are mentioned as a chief, sometimes adversary of the Hittites in the western Anatolia, sometimes an ally, perhaps a nominal ally, but a very relevant factor and a very powerful kingdom or entity to the Hittite West. Interesting thing about the Ekwesh is that they are chiefly mentioned in the Libyan invasion, in the invasion of the Libu, and they are listed among the defeated foes, and the defeated enemies of the Egyptians are mentioned as circumcised in the Hittite records by I'm sorry, but in the Egyptian records by the Egyptians. So that's a little ambiguity that we have when it comes to the Ekwesh and Achaea relations, because That practice was not documented, was not ever recorded among the Greeks, even not in the classical period, not in the Bronze Age period, not in the Mycenaean period, obviously. So it might be the fact that the other groups practiced that. It might be that there was a mistake on the Egyptian part, or whatever the case may be. Maybe they did practice that at that point in time. It is it is difficult to say, but the only relevant candidate that we have for Ekwesh is the Achaeans or Mycenaean Greeks. Next up, we have the Danaan. The Danaan, also chiefly related to the Greeks. One theory, well, not chiefly, there are alternative theories as well, and I would not be as sure about the Danaan as I am about the Ekwesh. And just a quick disclaimer, this is not none of this is 100% proven as the identity of the sea peoples, except for Luca and Karkisa. So Sheridan, we highly suspect, it is very possible, it is very plausible, very likely that they were from Sardinia. It is not 100% proven, but it is more than likely the case. Actually, they are among the stronger candidates. I believe beyond Karkisa and Luca, Sheridan are very, very. I think I'm pretty sure that there's very little dispute that they were from Sardinia, and then there's very little dispute that Ekwesh were the Achaeans, and also there's a very little dispute about the Paliset, but we'll get to the Paliset in shortly. So Shekelesh, we're not 100% sure, possibly connected to Sicily, but nothing is proven here for sure. Ekvesh, more than likely Achaeans, and Danaan, possibly related to a group connected with the Mycenaean Greece. Scholars connect them to the Danaans. Danaans is one of the names for the Greeks in the Iliad, as mentioned by Homer. We know Achaeans, Danaans, and Argives are synonymous to each other. They just mean Greeks in general in the context of Iliad and the Odyssey. What is the precise difference between Achaeans and Danaans? Surely they were synonymous with each other, but it's still two names, and there shouldn't be two names for no reason. So there might be some differences. Perhaps the Danaans were a dynasty. Perhaps they were um, in some way, shape, or form connected to the Mycenaean Greek identity. We do not know. We do not know for sure why exactly we have Danaans and Achaeans as synonyms for the same people. SAL says, but I mean, they are synonymous. Yes, they are synonymous, like the three tribes in classical Greeks. No, not like three tribes in classical Greeks. There were actually four tribes in classical Greece. There were Ionians, Aeolians, Dorians, and Achaeans. But those were clearly separate tribes that classical Greeks divided themselves into. Achaeans and Danaans were not specifically mentioned as separate tribes. They were mentioned just as synonyms to the same people. When they say, when Homer says Achaeans, and then in the next sentence he says Danaans, he means exactly the same thing, exactly the same people. He called, for example, he could call Agamemnon Achaean in one sentence, and then later on he would call him a Danaan, and then later on he would call him an Argive. So that's all the exact same thing. when it comes to Homer. And when it comes to classical Greek tribes, it's not the exact same thing. It's quite different. Dorians and Ionians were quite different to each other. Aeolians also, and Achaeans obviously as well. Louis Aldamis, Achaeans, Peloponnesians, Danaans, generic Greeks. This is a this is a plausible theory. I would remind you that they were Achaeans in central Greece as well, in the region of Phthia, where Achilles is from. Don't forget that in that region we have the Myrmidons, we have the the Pelasgians, we have the Hellenes, and we have the Achaeans, as mentioned by Homer. So Achaeans were not strictly they were not restricted to the Peloponnese, and also in the Iliad, Homer uses the word Achaeans not for Peloponnesians but for Greeks in general. He uses it synonymously with the Danaans, but who knows? Perhaps the Achaeans were just a chief tribe of the Mycenaean Greece, the most powerful tribe. Thus, we have an entity known as Ahiava or Ahiab in the Hittite sources, based on the Achaeans being the most powerful tribe in Greece, and perhaps the Naeans meant just generically Greeks, the same as Hellenes in the classical times. We do not know that for sure. These are just speculations on my part and possibly on Louis Aldamis's part as well. Interdict sent 5 gift memberships. Well, thank you very much for that. And we have several members now as gifted by Interdict so generously. We have Nata Sene, we have Hal Porter, who is, by the way, a Patreon member. So shout out to Hal Porter as well. We have Sapo, we have Josh Gardner, and Alacia. Well, thank you very much, Interdict. I'm not sure if you are using Discord or not. If you do use Discord, feel free to join WanaxTV on Discord. I think the link is in the description. Feel free to add me there, and if you want, you are free to contact me there or by email if you have any suggestions, any ideas of what we should do here. So feel free. Thank you very much for this series of gifts. Luis Aldame says maybe not strictly, but mostly so. It's possible. I never thought of this specific theory. I would not dismiss it. It's possible. I thought of quite a few possibilities when it comes to the word game here: Achaeans, Danaans, Argives. Well, obviously, we could probably discount Argives from the discussion because this is more like a regional thing because the Achaeans originated from the area of Argolis, so that's why they're called Argives, and that's why word Argives is sometimes applied to all of the Greeks by Homer. But when it comes to the Danaans, it's very interesting. We do have Egyptian records from the time of Thutmose III, which mentioned Danaans, or the land of the Tanayu, which the Egyptians associate with the Mycenaean Greeks. They clearly state, I believe, a list Mycenae and a few Mycenae, Thebes, the region of Thebes, the city of Mycenae, the port of Nauplion as chief locations or relevant locations in the land of Tanayu. So based on that, we do know that Tanayu or Danayu, which is uh, which is another pronunciation of the Egyptian writing. It is also pronounced Danayu, which is very close to Danea or the Danaans, the people. And we do know that Danaans, the Greeks of the land of the Tanayu, from Mycenae, among other cities, perhaps chiefly from Mycenae, considering the Mycenae was the most powerful among all of the Mycenaean cities, palatial centers, they did send an embassy to Pharaoh Thutmose III. So the Danaans did meet him, the Mycenaeans did meet the Pharaoh, and they brought him gifts from Greece. This is recorded by Thutmose III after his campaign against the Mitanni, where he crossed the Euphrates River. But back on the Danaans, so Danaans is definitely among the chief theories for the identity of a group known as Danaan. Another theory is Adana, a city in Cilicia or Cilicia in southern coastal Anatolia. And we do know that this city was inhabited at the time of the late Bronze Age collapse. And we do know that this city is perhaps connected to, I believe the mythological founder is Mospos, not, if I'm not mistaken. And he is also linked to Greek mythology as well. So Adana is in Cilicia is also a candidate for the identity of the Danaan. And a third theory is a tribe of Dan or a tribe of Dan, Israelite tribe known to us from the biblical sources. I believe a rather legendary tribe. Uh, I'm not sure if they are mentioned as inhabiting the city of Dor in the biblical sources. Obviously, we do know that historically at the time Dor was inhabited by the Tjekker. So there could be some connection there, some possible connection. It's difficult to say, but Danyan, there are three chief candidates for the identity of Danyan. Number one is Danaans, as it is believed that their origins are in the Aegean Sea, in some regions either a part of or influenced by the Mycenaean Greeks. Number two, Adana in Cilicia. And number three, perhaps an alternative theory, a tribe of Dan. Louis Aldamis says, Dan was surely a Greek Danaan colony, just as Philistines were a Pelasgian slash Pelasid colony too. This is possible because I mean this is not impossible. Let's say I wouldn't step forward and say, oh, this is definitely the case because we just don't know. I mean, I like to speculate, but I don't like to commit to these theories um, as much without more concrete evidence. But this is definitely interesting. There could be a relation between the Danaans and Adana, and there could be some relations between these two and the tribe of Dan, because the 12 tribes of Israel, according to the biblical sources, inhabited a quite extensive area in the Levant, in Canaan. So there could be relations or association with some of these Israelite tribes with actually other peoples from the region or colonists. That's not impossible. But once again, I'm not an expert on the biblical sources, so I will stick to my lane. Wasn't there also a Mycenaean art in the tomb of Hephaestus' advisor? Oh, Hatshepsut's advisor, Senenmut. I remember it being mentioned as one of the first contacts between the Egyptians and mainland Greece. So the first recorded contact was definitely between Thutmose III and the embassy of the Danaans. But this is interesting. I'm not aware of this. Carl, that you mentioned, perhaps I should do a little research. So we'll see. Damn the Dorian. Okay. Getai. Oh, okay. So now we're talking about non-Greek tribes. I believe Massagetai were Iranian tribe from the region close to, or a Scythian tribe, I believe. Perhaps not Iranian, perhaps a Scythian tribe, if I'm correct. Massagetai. Those were Scythians located to the north of Parthia and Bactria and so on, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. And Getai or Geta, they are to the north of Thracians, today's region of present day Romania, I believe. All right. So after Danian, we go to Teresh. And this is interesting. I believe Luis Aldamis has something to say about this also because one of the chief connections is with the Tyrrhenians or Tyrsanians, also known as the Etruscans, which we are in the works of delivering a major documentary video about. It's going to be 2 hours long. I mentioned it many times, so perhaps I'll leave it for the end of the video. So Teresh, chiefly connected by the scholars to the Tyrrhenians or Etruscans, but also a possible connection to the region of Troy or Tariusa. Thomas says if Troy was Teresh, then after they joined the Sea People, they joined the Sea People after the fall of Troy. Perhaps, possible. We do know that many of these groups, based on the context in which the Egyptian sources mention them, are likely either from the Aegean area or in some other way connected to the Aegean Sea. Whether or not we can go further west and reach Italy, Sicily, Sardinia is another matter, depends on the specific group in question. But in general, Lucca and Carkia were both on the Aegean Sea. They were on the Anatolian side on the Aegean Sea, but also they were regions of the Aegean Sea. Sheridan, obviously connected to Sardinia, not not located in the Aegean Sea, but perhaps connected when it comes to mercenaries, pirates, and so on. Shekelesh, same thing. Aquesh, chiefly connected with the Achaeans. Danian, possibly connected to the Greeks also, through Danaans, possible connection to Adana and the tribe of Dan. Alternatively, there's not too much evidence there. There's rather more possibility of them being related to the Aegean region. Teresh, similar thing. We have Tyrrhenians and we have the region of Troy. Luis Aldames is engaging in some linguistics here. We have Tyrsanians T. Rasna or T. Rasnos, which would mean Etruscan or Lemnian. So we do know that Rasna or Rasena, both words Etruscan native words, and they are Etruscan words for themselves. That's how Etruscans called themselves, the Rasna or the Rasena. Could the Shekelesh be connected to the Sicels in Sicily? They survived until the classical times. Yes, because the Greek name is Sikeloi, and Shekelesh, Sikeloi, very similar. Sicels is a Latin word, I believe, and Sicily or Sicilia or Sekilia, as it was known in ancient Greece, is definitely. It sounds kind of sounds. There are linguists. There are, I wouldn't say linguistic similarities, but when you pronounce it, it sounds similar. So obviously, Tyrrhenians is a Greek name for the Etruscans. Etruscans are a very prominent people from central Italy, the region known to the Greeks as Tyrrhenia, to the Romans as Etruria or Etruria, today's region of Tuscany in Italy, and that is a chief theory for the origin of the Teresh. Another also plausible theory is the region of Troy. So whether or not it's Tyrrhenia or the region of Troy, we are not sure, but those two are considered plausible possibilities by the scholars today. Just a phonetic. Yes, 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 yes. That's what I meant. I was searching for words. Hadrian was colonial Bayesian regardless of his name. His Latin was awful. We were talking about the Emperor Hadrian, I suppose. Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. So moving on, we have Peleset. And Peleset are very prominently mentioned by several sources. We do have Egyptian sources at first. We do have Israelite sources afterwards. We do have the Philistine language, which was also inscribed in some of the early Iron Age inscriptions, if I'm correct. And when it comes to the Peleset, they were one of the chief peoples that took part in the invasion of the land of Amuru, where they stationed at first in the Levant together with their allies, and then they marched on Egypt, where they attempted an invasion. They were defeated by Pharaoh Ramses III in 1175 BC. So Peleset were among the chief constituents of this invasion. And after they were defeated, they were settled in the area of southern Canaan, bordering the Egyptian controlled area. And we're talking about the historical Philistia, or today's regions of Gaza and coastal area all the way to the city of Dor. So we're talking about Ascalon or Ashkelon, the city. We're talking about Gath. We're talking about Gaza. And we're talking about several other Philistine city-states. And of course, we have estate care in the chat. Shout out to Estate Care, one of the sponsors of this channel. Chief sponsors, I would say, among the chief sponsors of this channel. The Real Tomahawk says the son of Japeth was most likely the ancestors of the Etruscans, early inhabitants of Italy, where Tuscany is today. Okay, well, I already mentioned that I'm not sure about all of these theories, but I wouldn't completely discount them. It's just that when when we don't have evidence, like when we don't have much evidence, as is the case right now, I wouldn't go too deep in that. And back to the Paliset. Paliset were known as the Peleshet, or also Paliset in the Hebrew sources. They settled the region which we just mentioned after this unsuccessful invasion of Egypt. They were settled there by the Pharaoh. They initially accepted the authority of the Pharaoh, and they bordered Israelites. They bordered the kingdoms of Israel and Judah to their east inland, and they bordered the city of Dor to the north. And in historical times, they are prominently mentioned by by many contemporary sources. They fought against the Israelites. They fought against the Judeans. They fought against Assyrians in several occasions. They were five chief city-states of the Philistines of the Paliset, and they were eventually defeated by the Assyrians. And when it comes to the origin of the Paliset, we do know that the Hebrew sources, the biblical sources, their origin being the island of Kaftor or Crete or Keftiu as it was known in Egypt, Egyptian sources. So the origins of the Paliset are the island of Crete, and we do know for sure that this group was related and was likely a part of Mycenaean Greece because the pottery of the Paliset in the region of Philistia in the mid 12th century BC is near identical pottery of the island of Cyprus produced by the Mycenaean Greek colonists after the Bronze Age collapse, and it is near identical to the pottery of the Aegean region, the so-called sub-Mycenaean pottery in the Aegean. We do have exhibits from the island of Rhodes, which are identical to the pottery locally produced at the same time period in Cyprus, and same as the pottery locally produced in the same time period in Philistia by the Paliset. So Paliset were definitely a part of the Mycenaean Greece. In which exact capacity, we do not know whether they were related to the Pelasgians, which is phonetically the most similar option here. We also do know that Pelasgians were among the inhabitants of Crete at this particular time, because we do have mentions in at least in Odyssey of the ethnic composition of the island. We do have Eteocretans, we do have Achaeans, Kydonis, Dorians, and Pelasgians as inhabitants at this time, and Pelisid being from Crete could possibly be related to Pelasgians. And when it comes to the Paliset architecture in Philistia at this time in the 12th century BC, part of the 12th century and throughout the 11th century, we do have Megaron, we do have Mycenaean architectural features, the same things that we have on Cyprus and the same things that we have in the sub-Mycenaean period in Greece itself and the Aegean. So the origins of the Paliset, Crete, who they were exactly, a tribe from Mycenaean Greece, a tribe from Crete, related to Pelasgians, possibly, but one thing is for sure, they were more than likely from Crete and surely a part of the Mycenaean Greece. Moving on, we have perhaps the most mysterious and the least known group, which is the Weshesh. Weshesh are known only by their name. There's no origins, there's no additional information on the Weshesh. So we do not know virtually anything about this group. It is hypothesized that their origins, similar to Peleset and Ekwesh, lead us to the area of the Aegean and to Mycenaean Greece. And let me just double check the context in which they were mentioned. So the Weshesh are only mentioned together with the Peleset during the attempted invasion of Egypt. And the only reference to Weshesh by the Egyptian sources is the addition of the words of the sea. So they are known as the Weshesh of the sea. And the Danaan are also mentioned as the Danaan of their islands or in their isles. I believe that Ramses III mentions the feet of Danaan in their isles. So there was some kind of Egyptian campaign, perhaps retaliatory campaign against some of these groups. And the Danaan are definitely located in some of the islands. So that would confirm a theory of the Danaans and Aegean Sea as their location, or broadly Greece being their homeland. And I believe that Weshesh, being mentioned in the same context, Weshesh of the sea, and being mentioned alongside Peleset in the attempted invasion of Egypt and nowhere else, would also be from the area of the Mycenaean Greece, or definitely the area of some islands. And if they were from Cyprus, it would be mentioned that they were from Cyprus. And the only other option is the most logical option is the Aegean Sea. So Weshesh possibly associated with the Achaeans or with other perhaps non-Achaean Greek group or another group that's from Greece, from the Aegean. That's as much as we can go when we are trying to determine the identity of the Weshesh. But beyond that, we do not know much. And finally, last but not least, we have Tjekker. The Tjekker, which we know from the Medinet Habu and Papyrus Harris I inscriptions. Again, talking of the attempted invasion of Egypt, the Battle of Nile Delta, the land battle between the Sea Peoples and the Egyptians under Ramses III, Egyptian victory, and Teresh are also mentioned similarly to the Weshesh as Tjekker. Teresh are mentioned as Teresh of the sea, but Tjekker are only mentioned in the context of the Sea People's invasion of Egypt. They are mentioned in the Ramses III narrative, Medinet Habu, Papyrus Harris I. They're mentioned in Onomasticon as well, which is a later period, which is 1100 BC, and which is relevant because it means that Tjekker still exist in 1100 BC. Weshesh are not mentioned at this time. Weshesh are only exclusively mentioned in during this attempted invasion together with Peleset and nowhere else. But Tjekker are also mentioned alongside Peleset in this invasion, but they are mentioned further. They are mentioned in the Onomasticon, and they are mentioned in the story of Wenamun, dated to even later period, 1000 BC. We have this Egyptian story of Wenamun, where I can't recall what the story is at the moment. I believe there's a traveler that goes to the city of Dor, which is the city of the Tjekker, and then he travels to Cyprus, where he's attacked by angry mob, if I'm correct. So either way, in this story of Venemon, Tjekker is prominently mentioned, and they are inhabiting the city of Dor, which is to the north of Philistia. So they came together with the Paliset. They were defeated by Ramses III, and just like the Paliset, Tjekker were settled in Canaan, and they controlled the city of Dor. To the north of Dor is coastal Phoenicia, the Phoenician city-states. And I believe Dor also, at some point in time, was inhabited by the Phoenicians. So eventually, Tjekker would come in conflict, presumably, with the Phoenicians, since we do know that Dor at some point in time was either controlled by or was a Phoenician city-state during the historical times. But after the late Bronze Age collapse, the city was controlled by the Tjekker. Where are the Tjekker from? The connection, once again, just like Weshesh, just like Paliset, just like Hekwesh, Tjekker are chiefly connected to the Aegean region, the Aegean Sea, perhaps the island of Crete, perhaps the region of Troy. We have Teucrians as one of the theories of the identity of the Tjekker. Or Tyrians, as Luis Aldames says. Well, this is why it's great to do a live episode, because we can have some theories which I did not think of appear on the spot. Tjekker, the city of Tyrins, obviously was the chief city, the chief Mycenaean city, or should we say the chief city in Argolis in the sub-Mycenaean period. After the sack of Mycenae, after the destruction of Pylos in 1180 to 1170 BC, the city of Tiryns continued to thrive, and it is believed that many of the Mycenaean refugees or many of the Mycenaean inhabitants moved to the city of Tiryns because it was better protected than the damaged and sacked Mycenae, and we have Tiryns as confirmed by the archaeological sources, because we do not have Linear B records anymore, because we are slowly entering the Greek Dark Ages. So between 1170 and 1050 BC, Tiryns is thriving as a sub-Mycenaean city in Argolis. I believe that the population, which was estimated at about 10,000 inhabitants in the late Bronze Age, surges to about 15,000 in the sub-Mycenaean period, and it remained one of the chief sub-Mycenaean cities until the very end of the period, and slowly started declining after 1050 BC, where we have already entered the Greek Dark Ages at this point, and at the same time, the Dorian-controlled city of Argos is emerging as the chief polity in Argolis, and the city of Tiryns is, much like Mycenae, reduced to a very minor settlement by the Archaic and later Classical times. All right, so we have gone through all of the recorded sea peoples. If you have some more theories, we can discuss them. Karkisa, Luka, Sherden, Shekelesh, Ekwesh, Danyan, Teresh, Peleset, Weshesh, and Tjekker. As you can see, some of these peoples we do know for a fact where they came from. Karkisa is Karia, Luca is Lucia or Luca lands, Sherden possibly Sardinia, Shekelesh possibly Sicily, Ekwesh very likely the Achaeans, Danyan also possibly related to the late Bronze Age Greeks, perhaps related to term Danaans, perhaps further related to Adana or alternatively to a tribe of Dan. Teresh, possibly related to Tyrrhenians or also possibly to the region of Troy. Peleset, certainly from the area of the Mycenaean Greece, from Crete to be more precise. Possibly related to Pelasgians, who knows, but we do know that they did bring the Mycenaean culture with them. So they did build their cities in the Megaron style, Mycenaean style architecture. They did locally produce sub-Mycenaean pottery, same as the inhabitants of Cyprus and same as inhabitants of the island of Rhodes and the broader post-Mycenaean area of Greece, Greek mainland, and the Aegean Sea. Weshesh, no information on them besides the wording Weshesh of the sea, just judging by the fact that they are only mentioned alongside Peleset and nowhere else, and mentioned as Weshesh of the sea, brings us to a possible theory of Aegean origin. I mean, I don't see any other candidate that would be more plausible than the Aegean Sea, but nevertheless, Weshesh is the least known among these groups. And Tjekker, which historically we know where they were located after the Bronze Age collapse, the coastal city of Dor in coastal Levant, north of Philistia, but the question is where did they come from? Likely either allied or in some other way associated with the Paliset, possibly Weshesh, possibly from the Aegean Sea, possibly perhaps from the Anatolian side of the Aegean Sea, who knows? But it is very likely that many of these groups, except Sherden and Shekelesh, and possibly Teresh, would have been located somewhere in the Aegean Sea. Luis Aldame says Tjekker, the Teucrians. It is one of the chief theories, but I believe that Teucrians are solely mentioned as a theory based on Greek mythology because that's chiefly where they are known from. There is no documented historical group known as Teucrians, I believe. I believe the only identity of the Teucrians is associated with the Trojans because the Trojans were sometimes called Teucrians based on the myth of Teucros being the first king of the region, who was then succeeded by Dardanos and then Tros, Elos. We know the story of the Trojan foundation in Greek mythology. So that's the only connection when it comes to Teucrians. When it comes to any documented historical peoples, we do not have any concrete connection to Tjekker based on the above mentioned context of other constituents of the Sea Peoples. I would assume that they would have originated from the Aegean Sea area, either the Aegean Islands, perhaps coastal Anatolia, perhaps Crete, perhaps coastal Greek mainland, who knows? But I would assume that that would be a strong possibility, or it's plausible. Let's say it's plausible. All right, so we have been online for an hour and 45 minutes. I believe that it is slowly time to conclude this episode. We have went through every single group of the sea peoples, and if you have theories, let us know in the chat, let us know in the comments on the video. Also, if you happen to use Discord, the link to our Discord channel is in the video description. The link to our Patreon page is also in the video descriptions. If you have Patreon, I advise you to join. You don't have to be a paid member. You can join Patreon as a free member and still access many of the perks. Not perks, it just content and stuff and pictures and interesting things that I'm unable to share on YouTube because YouTube is a video platform, and in the community page of WanaxTV on YouTube, we are very limited on which pictures we can upload. So you can better access that on the Patreon page, such as pictures from the featured exhibition of the Getty Villa in LA, where History with Sai, he attended that in person. It was a few weeks ago, and I was talking to him that day actually, and he sent me many pictures and a few videos of the exhibits from the Getty Villa. Um and I was able to share that with everybody on Patreon, and I believe that is accessible to free members, so you don't have to pay. You can just join Patreon as a free member and still access most of the stuff that's available on Patreon, because it usually people are not there for the perks, they're just there to support the channel, which is highly appreciated, and that's why we are sharing virtually everything with everybody on Patreon, whether it's a free member or a paid member. It doesn't really matter. I think one of the perks for the paid Patreon members is the credits that we display at the end of each episode. I believe there are a few other um, stuff as well, but most of things that we have on there are accessible to everybody, including the free members. So join us on Patreon. Omar says, thanks, bro, for your content. I love your channel and all of your videos. Well, thank you very much. While we are here, let's touch on the future content. Etruscan Civilization documentary is still in works. We are about 80% completed. I believe I have about 45 minutes of animations to complete before everything is done. And after that, I only have music to complete, and the video will be uploaded after that. So the plan is to hopefully finish by the end of the month or at some point in November. In the meantime, we will continue with these live episodes. I will try to do them more often, perhaps 2 or 3 per week, or depends on my free time. I would like to have at least one scheduled for Sundays. So we should be online and live every Sunday. And beyond that, I the best I could do is these unannounced episodes. But judging by the viewers, this today was very, very random. I did not announce it. I did mention that I could possibly go live today. I mentioned in the previous live episode, but there was no mention on the time or anything. I wasn't even sure. I was preparing these notes that you see on the screen, and by the time I finished, it was already I believe 9 o'clock, 9 p.m., and I wasn't sure whether or not I should go live at that late hour. But this is evidence that I should do it because we have what, 50 people online. I believe that peak was even higher. So so it's great if I manage to do announced scheduled live episodes, the viewership would be much greater, obviously, but uh, I will try to do that at least for the weekend live episodes. Josh Gardner says, I was pleasantly surprised to see this stream. Well, during the regular days of the week, and I would say if there is a time of the day where you should usually expect a stream to happen unannounced, it would be evening in the Eastern time. So I know it's not ideal for Europe and Greece and Cyprus and so on. It's way after midnight for them, but that's the best I can do with my own time schedule. I would like to be able to go at noon Eastern time, which would be 6, 7 p.m. European time. I would love to be able to do that, but I'm not able to do that. And yeah, this is how it is at the moment. Perhaps on weekend I can arrange it differently. Sunday is definitely a day where I have the most free time. I'm limited not so much by the projects that I'm working on the channel, but also with the job which I have, and one of the sponsors which was mentioned earlier in the stream has much to do with that. So yeah, we have a business that we're running, so that's limiting my free time severely. But it is also a good thing because that's what enables me to keep this channel alive because uh, this channel is not some great doesn't make some great profits or anything like that. I was if I it yeah, I wouldn't be able to get any of the equipment or anything if it was due to the profits of the channel. So it's actual business that's allowing me to have this channel and to invest money in it and to keep you know I got all new equipment very recently, right before I started streaming, and we will have some great things in works. We might have to travel to some locations which are very relevant to this channel. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna reveal much at this moment. We might do it with some other people that are known to you. I don't wanna reveal too much, but we have a lot of stuff in works which which require um, which require money, obviously, and that I am able to do that because of the business. I'm able to run the channel and not worry about, channel being more or less profitable. Obviously, I am very happy that we have a lot of these exclusive members and patrons, and I appreciate you joining the community, but that's why I always say you don't have to join as a paid member on Patreon. If you join as a free member, that's also great because you will access almost the same stuff that's available to everybody else on Patreon. And also, if you happen to use Discord, join us on Discord. Luis Aldames, you're doing fine. WanaxTV, do what you can. Yes, well, I mean, we are in a good place. I'm not worried about I'm not worried about not being or being able to produce quality content or anything like that. That's going to continue because we can, right? So Josh says the audio and video of the stream is really good. So thank you very much. Uh, right before the right before I started the first live episodes, I bought all new equipment. I bought the new 4K camera. I bought this Shure microphone, and what else? The audio interface, the whole equipment set. I got it, and that's what's behind the quality. Audio and video, and I believe it's a level up. It's a significant improvement from the videos of the past years. If you remember, we always had we didn't have perfect audio on them. And I have some great comments in the chat. It says Josh says Wanax is humble and gracious. Um Nikolaos says your content is most excellent. Nikolaos, if you are in Greece right now, thank you very much for being on because I know what time is there right now. So thank you. Louis, audio is very important for the video quality more than the graphics, arguably. I agree with you. I agree with you. And you tell me what do you think about this new audio? And even this is not the perfect audio. When I do the regular episodes, the audio will be even better than this because this is obviously I have stuff happening in, well, not stuff happening in the background, but I did not use any effects that increase the audio quality. This is just raw audio, which is, I guess it's not bad. It should be good. Nicolaus says, nope, I'm to the south of you. How do you know where I am? Audio is crisp, perfect. Well, that's good. That's good. I think audio feedback is very important because I did invest a lot in this new audio equipment. Not only the microphone. I think I got the the best microphone there is on the market right now. The newest Shure microphone. I think it's SM7B, whatever it's called. But not only that, I got the brand new audio interface. Uh, what is the other thing called? I'm not an audio expert, so I just went by the recommendations of the audio people that the sound people that I know. So I took their advice and went for it. So it's good that we have noticeable improvements. That's perfect. Nicholas, I think you are in New England. You are correct. You are correct. I am in New England, but I'm not sure if you can guess where exactly. I doubt that you could guess that. Luis Aldames, it's good audio, no complaints whatsoever. Rather thinking on some other channels with good content but bad audio. Well, that's true. I mean, I can testify that audio makes a lot of difference on my own example because you can take a look at the WanaxTV videos of the previous years where I used the HyperX microphone, which is also good. At least it is supposed to be good according to the YouTube research and Google research that I did, but it is a microphone that goes directly to the laptop. And I think that's what was behind the audio not being so great because right now I plug it in the audio interface and then I do configuration in the interface and then I plug the interface in the laptop. So it makes a lot of difference. Luis Aldam is Maine. No, it's not Maine. And Nicolaus says, I think you are in New England, Massachusetts. I don't know what to say. Stalker. No, I don't think so. I think that he made a good educated guess. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you are right. You are right. All right. So perhaps in the next episode we'll maybe figure out where in Massachusetts. I'm not gonna go that far to reveal that, so that's all good. I think we are good to go here. We have completed the episode. Some casual talk afterwards. Perhaps we could incorporate that in all of the episodes. Perhaps after every episode we could do some casual talk afterwards. I think it adds to the quality of the content after all, if everybody agrees. I was going to say Boston or Upper New York. Boston is a solid guess, but it's not Boston. It's not Boston. Well, Nicolaus, thank you very much. And you said you were to the south of me, so let me guess. Could it be could it be Rhode Island? If I could, I'd make a video of Greek ancient warriors dancing at the tune of, of Wanax our king. Oh, by the way, one of the topics for a future episode, as we discussed in the previous live stream, would be single combat in antiquity. So perhaps not the next episode. I need some time to do a research on single combat, but we'll do single combat. Colonial Virginia, I'm applying to be the next royal governor. Okay, okay. Well, I was not that close. I was more thinking of immediate south, but you did first guess that I was in New England, so I should have guessed that you are not in New England. So yeah, not as good of an educated guess as you did for sure. All right. Well, we will conclude this episode right now, and I would like to thank everybody for coming. Perhaps next episode could be a little longer. Perhaps. Oh well, we already hit 2 hours mark, so that's long enough. Uh, Thank you very much. We will be back this week for sure. In the worst case scenario, we'll be back on Saturday on Sunday. In the best case scenario, we'll be back earlier, maybe tomorrow, maybe day after tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see how everything goes. But thank you very much, and see you again soon.